Welcome everybody to our Ask Me Anything About CFCC certification. We're glad that you're here. I'm going to take just a few minutes to allow some of the attendees to get in the room. And while we're doing that, I see someone all the way from Brazil. Welcome. While we're doing that, I just wanted to, first of all, my name is Penny Woolery. I'm sure some of you have met me before or seen my face plastered on our website. I am the manager of certification and membership, and I, along with Val Smith, and I'll give her an opportunity to introduce herself, will be hosting and handling your questions and answers. So as a point of housekeeping, you won't be able to speak to the panelists. You will use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen to ask your questions. And between Val and I, we will be monitoring those, asking them on your behalf. And then the panelists will answer your questions live. So get all of your questions ready. We're primed and ready to answer them. Val, do you want to give them a quick introduction?
Sure. I'm Valerie Smith. I'm the Senior Credentialing Analyst in the Certification Department. When you submit your CFCC applications, you will be communicating mostly with me. I'll be the person who sends your application to the CFCC committee for review. I do a preliminary check of everything, so hopefully it's the revisions are minimal. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any of them during your application process.
Thank you, Valerie. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Charlie Bouillard. He is our chair of the certification board. Go ahead, Charlie.
Thanks, Penny, and welcome everyone to our interactive webinar to discuss AACE's expertise level certified forensic claims consultant certification. Glad to have you all with us, and very pleased to have a great panel with us to respond to your question. These are the members of the CFCC committee of the certification board. We have the chair is Jim Zach, and along with Jim this evening, we have Glenn Palmer, John McKay, and Nick Flores. And Jim, I don't know if you have any comments before we begin taking questions, but if you'd like to say something, you're welcome to.
Thank you, Charlie, but I don't think so. This is supposed to be a Q&A session for the attendees, so I don't think I need to take any of that time.
All right. Back to you, Penny.
Okay, well, Valerie, do we have any questions yet in our Q&A box?
We do not, which is funny because normally when I talk to people who are applying for the CFCC, they have a lot of questions. So
sure do.
Maybe we'll start out with one that I'm familiar with that people ask a lot about. People ask about the letters of recommendation and what needs to be included in that. So do you guys want to take that?
Well, I'll start. You need to understand the letters of recommendation must be from an attorney or a client, either current or past client. And what we want to see is them talking about your active role with them on a claim, whether it's, just a claim on site that you're analyzing or a claim expert report that has been submitted to arbitration, litigation, mediation, whatever. So that's what we're looking for.
It would be, can I say something? It would also be nice, the applicant has to have 12 years of experience. It would be nice if the recommendations covered all or most of that 12 years. So if you knew someone for 4 or 5 years, an attorney that was familiar with your work during a certain period of time, that would be important to be in the letter to kind of cover the experience that you had and the type of experience you had over the 12 years. That will also help you qualify to sit for the exam.
And I think the important thing to remember too is that the letters need to be pretty robust and include details about the claims work that you did so that the committee can gauge your depth of knowledge for for the exam. We do have a question. It says, please explain the basic requirements for the application. So do you guys want to do it? You want me to do it?
Oh, why don't you go ahead and do that, Valerie? You're the one that reviews them all.
Well, pre-review.
Yeah.
So basically, you need to have 12 years of experience, specifically specifically directed and centered on prosecution, defense, and resolution of claims and disputes. You need to have a 4-year relevant college degree. You need to have 4 letters of recommendation, like we were talking about, from industry professionals that verify your years of experience. And you need to submit an expert report or formal claim submittal or professional paper that was accepted for publication that has been written within the last 24 months.
And a
I'm
current
gonna-
certification or license.
Oh, I'm sorry, I totally forgot that.
Well, I've got it showing on the screen as you were talking on our website.
Thank you.
So if there is something specific related to any of those eligibility requirements that maybe you would like more examples for, or more in-depth conversation, something specific to one of those, please put that in your question and answer box so that we can use this opportunity to answer any of your questions related to the details of that. And there's a very long list of the certifications that are acceptable for this certification. And there is a way for you to submit if there's something that you have that isn't listed on here that the CFCC committee can take under consideration, that then would be added to the list. I think our committee did a great job at scouring all of the licenses or the certifications, but we could have missed some, so that's good.
Okay, the next question is, how do you handle the differences between common law experience in regard to civil law in the exams?
The short answer is we don't. If you look at the CFCC certification guide, we call to your attention that this exam is entirely common law. We are trying to figure out how to do a corollary set of exams for civil law, but we're not making a lot of progress yet on that. I mean, civil law, even on one continent, civil law in South America is not the same in Peru as it is in Chile, as it is in Venezuela. So it's a little hard to get into that. So we've kept it common law, and at least for the time being.
Okay, the next question is the technical paper for the AACE conference accepted for the work product?
Well, if it's a claims related paper and published within the last 24 months before your application, I would assume it would be.
And as long as it has the, we do want displaying a rigorous analysis or
Yes.
presentation of, it's got to be something that's relevant to the certification.
And that's easily, to Jim's point about accepted for publication in the last 24 months, that's easily verifiable through the tech board. So
Sure.
So the next two questions are kind of related. Somebody asked why the PMP was not included on the post-education certification list, but it is. So you just need to scroll down a little bit. And then also the Guild of Project Controls was not included on the list. I'd have to look, but
It's on there.
it is on there. Okay.
Thought so.
Right. Any more questions? Penny, maybe you can show that list again, and then show where, if there's something that's not listed, just show where they can click to apply. Okay. You'll have to scroll on the list when you look at it because there's a lot. There it is right there, Guild of Project Controls.
Right.
Right. There is quite a bit of information that's available through the website and under the certification tab, and also under the certification hub.
And the other thing I would mention is that Penny pointed out that if you have a certification, it's not on the list. There's a way for you to ask the cert staff to put it on the list. So the list is dynamic. If you printed off the requirement a year ago, you may find that there's a couple more today. So,
It may be, Penny, if you go to the bar on the right of that listing and scroll it down, it may be at the bottom. And then, yeah, acceptable certification or license.
right.
That little box at the bottom left.
Patty, you're muted.
Okay, well, here we go. That is not the link there. This is
Oh,
just,
okay.
yeah. I don't know what happened to the link, so I paused the screen while I go check where the link is, because I can then give it to you, but something happened to the web page because it used to be listed right there. So just give me a moment, please.
Okay, so while we do that, while Penny does that, there's a question that's in the chat. Is it the intention to have the 12 years of experience as an expert witness prior to application? Or would time in a project manager or project controls role for a contractor that was involved in a claims to be sufficient? And then further discussion of applicable experience would be helpful.
I can jump in on that if I may. So the eligibility requirements, the 12 years is focused on claims relevant experience and in preparation and submission of claims. So if your responsibility with a contractor was primarily focused on preparation and submission of claims or defensive claims and active participation in dispute resolution, then that would be acceptable. But just to say I have 12 years of experience as a project manager and occasionally I submit a claim, that's really not what the requirements are looking for.
Isn't it true that that you don't ever have to have been an expert witness to qualify for this exam?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep. The presumption when we put this together is that these are people who've been working in the claims business, but haven't yet got to the level of expert witness. And so what we're trying to do is if they pass this and get the certification, it is more likely that they or their firms can propose them as a potential expert in a case. And that of course presumes that you actually have the experience of that type of a project or that type of a claim. But that was the idea. So in all the CFCC applications I've seen, I think I've only seen maybe one or no more than two that have actually been submitted by somebody who'd gotten on a witness stand. Generally, these are people, who are assisting the experts or assisting the attorneys or whatever. So I think that's a good point, Glenn.
So I did put the link to, and you can see it on this screen, or at least I hope you're seeing that. this is what the form looks like. I'm going to get our website updated, but for the purposes of this webinar, I just wanted to give you the link and show you what it looks like. And we are asking that there's only one certification. I should put license on there too per request for each application or request.
Next question is, how do you handle confidentiality or arbitral procedures that prevent an expert to present its works?
Well, I can answer that one because when I did my application, what I submitted was a claim that I just prepared, a major claim that I just prepared for a contractor. And of course, we had NDAs and all that sort of stuff. So what was allowed is that redacted project name, all individual names, name of the owner, name of the contractor. So there's a lot of black marks in this document I sent in. And you can do that. I did check with the legal counsel I was working for, and they went over it to make sure that the redactions were to their satisfaction. But you can do that.
And I think that's a really good point, Jim, because the purpose of asking for the work product is not who you worked for, but how you present your work.
Right.
How you communicate the depth of your analysis, things of that nature.
Another thing that we sometimes have an issue with when people submit their reports is that we can't discern from that report whether the candidate or the applicant is the author or a major contributor in that. So that's an important thing to consider when submitting your report. If we can't find that in your submission, we will ask you for an affidavit to be completed, has some questions in it about your authorship and your role in that. I don't currently have any questions in the queue.
There
Do
seems
you
to be
all?
a fair amount of activity in the chat, but I can't tell whether that's another question or things that are links that are being posted.
Some links.
Okay.
Maybe since we're talking so much about experience, maybe one of you gentlemen would be interested in talking about how you got to where you are now. Like, what was your career path? Maybe that'll help some of the potential candidates.
Well, why don't we kick it off? John, you want to talk about your career path into this industry?
Sure. Yeah, actually, I followed the gentleman that introduced me. I've spent 30 years of my career working with Charlie. I initially was out in the field working on projects on behalf of owners as a CM agent, and there were opportunities to review requests for equitable adjustment and whatnot in claims. And then after that, I spent the past 25 years of my career, for the most part, focused around claims and disputes, analyzing claims on behalf of owners, contractors, and design professionals. And I think my first testimony experience was probably 10 years into my career, and then applied for the CFCC after I had probably quite a few more years than the 12 years by the time I got around to applying for it. And that would be one thing I would caution everybody when you do make a submission. You know, we do see some that come in that's kind of on like the razor's edge of, do they really have 12 years of experience? You know, it takes a while to get 12 years of experience truly in claims preparation and analysis. It's really hard to do in the first 12 years of your career. So,
Nick, how did you get into this?
Well, let's see, I was actually in the Civil Engineer Corps, joined the Navy, and I was a contracting officer for NAVFAC. And I was on the administration side, not the procurement side. So on the administration side, as a contracting officer, we are the ones that made the decisions, contracting officers' final decisions for claims. So mine started with actually reviewing contractors' claims. And making decisions with regard to their acceptability or deniability. And I did that for about 15 years. So I started actually working right out of college as an engineer, really looking at claims, forced to, I guess, actually. And then when I got out of the Navy, I started as a project manager, but quickly moved to dispute resolution because I had so much experience in the Navy doing that. So all the companies I basically worked for, although there was an element of project management that did involve my job, I almost exclusively worked in claims or claims resolution, claim submission, delay impact analysis, that type of thing during my career in the private industry. And then pretty late in life, I actually found the AACE organization and this certification, which really appealed to me when I read about what it was about. And even though I had testified a number of times in court, it was more as a fact witness or more as say being the contracting officer that made the decision on a claim. I had not testified as a expert. And the certification, I think, is very critical in getting you qualified or recognized as an expert. Because when you are moving to that level, the first question you're going to be asked is, have you ever testified as an expert? And it's a catch-22. If you've never testified as an expert, how do you ever get an opportunity
That's true.
to testify as an expert? And the certification, I think, really is tremendously helpful to provide a credential that would allow you, the certification basically certifies by AACE International that you are qualified to testify as an expert because of your experience, your education, and your work product, and recommendations from people who are in the field. So that gives you a foot in the door, and that kind of helps you to overcome the disadvantage of not testifying, but wanting to be a testifying expert. So, and since then, of course, testifying as an expert has been relatively easy, given the fact that I have the certification and my background. But it's that background that qualifies you. The certification of your background is really what the CFC certification actually provides. It's just a certification from a reputable organization that writes the recommended practices that you are qualified to testify as an expert.
Glenn, you started off as an actual engineer and ended up in claims, right?
That's true. Well, I did start off in engineering on a large nuclear plant here in New Hampshire, actually. And I didn't like being inside all the time. I'm kind of an outdoors guy. And so I got a chance to join a detail scheduling group whose responsibility was to detail the top 10 critical paths of the job. And this was back in the old days when, we were scheduling on mainframes at night with punch cards. So your work product was greatly enhanced by hand drawing short-term critical path schedules. And that's what my group did. And you got to spend a lot of time with the area superintendent as well as all of his lead supervisors in that scheduling process. And it helped you realize that, scheduling is a team effort. You can't lock yourself up in a room and come up with a really good schedule all by yourself. you need everybody's input, everybody's buy-in. So that's kind of how I got started. I eventually got hired by Stone and Webster, where I met you, Jim, years ago, as the head of scheduling. And that was actually when I did my first testimony. Stone and Webster actually had their own consulting group. And so when they got into a claim, they would just steal people from, the regular groups to help them. So I was doing their scheduling analysis, and before I knew it, I became a consultant, and 25 years later, here I am.
Okay. Well, my background is a bit like Nick's. I'm not an engineer. But when I left the Army, I was hired to work for a government agency in South Carolina as a contracted grants officer. And in those days, there weren't a lot of claims against in South Carolina because we were one of the last sovereign immunity states. It was unconstitutional for a contractor to sue a public works owner unless the legislature passed a special law allowing you to do it. They didn't do that very often. But the old EPA construction grants program, which started in '72, broke that cycle, because if you accepted a grant from those guys, there was a whole set of terms and conditions that had to be put into your contract. And it was the federal government stuff that Nick was so fond of. So all of a sudden, the claims business grew up in South Carolina, and I got involved in analyzing those things, because if the grantee, like the city of Columbia, ran out of money before the construction was done, they would come back to ask our agency for more money, and they would base it on change orders and claims. So somebody had to analyze that. And so, I did that. I helped EPA write their actual guidebook to handling construction claims. And then I was hired by an engineering construction management firm to go up to Milwaukee. And what I learned there was the multiple prime thing. It was illegal up there to have a single prime contract on a public works job. So you had to bid MEP as 3 separate contracts. None of those guys could hold a general contractor's license. So we bid a 4th one, which we generally called, oh, hey, there's the general, which was really not anything in the first 3. So we not only had lots of claims against the owner, but all the claims between the independent prime contractors came to the owner because they didn't have a relationship with each other. And I frankly found that, to a certain extent, like Glenn, I think, and Nick, I found that sitting in an office all day and just doing routine administrative stuff was a lot less fun than getting involved in claims. And so I stuck around, and as a result, as of this year, I've been doing this part-time or full-time for 51 years.
Wow.
And I learned I learned something, Charlie, almost new on every claim, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you're working for a claims firm, construction claims firm, like many of us have, you may be working on 2 or 3 claims at the same time. So it's not like I'm just focusing on New York City every day for 6 months. I may be working on 2 or 3 others also. And so that adds some spice to your life. Valerie, I think there's been a couple of other questions that maybe have come in.
There are, but first we have an attendee that raised their hand.
Oh.
Now, there are some, I'm going to allow this person, I'm going to click a button to allow them to ask their question. So it might be something that's really long and they don't want to type it out. So his name is Blake, and I am now going to select a button here to allow you to talk, Blake. So go ahead and ask your question. Blake, we can't hear you. Okay. I see that he is on a speaker, but I can't hear him. Blake, can you put in the chat if you're having some technical difficulties? We can't hear you if you're asking any questions. And while we're waiting on him, Val, do you want to go to the question and answer while we're waiting for Blake?
Sure. This is in regard to the 12 years experience in claim preparation to have the eligibility to sit for the exam. Is it your consideration to reduce the number of years?
We've debated that on the CFCC committee. And frankly, I don't think we are willing to do that. The bottom line is that to be an expert, first of all, to be an expert, you got to get an attorney who's going to hire you for one side or the other.
Yeah.
Most construction litigators are pretty much type A personalities. You know, the word we use, the phrase we use in the United States, most construction litigation attorneys are junkyard dogs, and they're unlikely to hire somebody, you know, with only 4 or 5 years experience and put them up as an expert, unless you're into a super technical area, you know, or something like that, which most of what we work on are schedule delay claims, impact damage claims, and things like that. It's not nearly as technical as you know, why did the nuclear reactor blow up or something? So no, I don't think we're inclined to drop that.
Yeah, we did talk about that. We did talk about that at length. And the thing is that the CFCC certification is, you know, we take great care in making sure that the candidate is qualified, and then that they and that when they take the exam is fairly rigorous. And all this is for a reason. It's the highest level of professionalism in this area that certification that's offered, and it's not given lightly. And because of that, though, we're hoping that it provides you and sets you apart when you get it, that this is something that is very well applied and you know, certifies a certain level of expertise. So we considered reducing the 12 years. Actually, we reduced the, if you don't qualify, number of years. I think that used to be, if you don't have a postgraduate type of certification or licensure, and then you can substitute that for an additional 4 years. But I think that used to be, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, I think that used to be 12 years.
It was.
It did.
Yeah. So we reduced that considerably. I remember because I didn't have any other licensures, and I had to have 24 years of experience. So it was, you know, it was, we have since changed that to be considerably less. But in reality, in order to pass the exam, you probably need at least 12 years of direct claims experience to get the breadth of knowledge that you're going to have to sit for in the exam. And if you do have that, you know, that level of experience, then you should be able to pass the exam. If you're involved in claims at a broad level for at least 12 years, then you should be well prepared to take the exam. But less than that, you probably will struggle, quite frankly.
There's a comment back from the same person that says if we have higher education, then AACE should consider that.
You know, I've been asked that a number of times, and my reaction is there is nothing in school, engineering school, architectural school. There's basically nothing in law school that teaches you about construction. Now I know because the law school, I took like 5 semesters of law school when I was getting my master's degree, and we had 2 of those 5 semesters were contracts. It was just general contracts, not construction contracts. And so even it would be highly unlikely that any additional postgraduate education, like, master's degree or doctor or something like that, would really be involved with construction claims. I've not found an institution around the world that really does that. The closest you might come is if you're a graduate of Robert Gordon Law School up in Scotland, where they do have a construction law. But they're just talking about the construction process. They're not talking about scheduling
Analysis.
and cost analysis and stuff like that. So I don't think we'd be inclined to do that.
Yeah, if we were going to, I mean, for me, when we talked about it, I mean, if we were going to consider dropping it, it wouldn't be considerable. Okay, maybe it'd be 10 rather than 12, but it's not, this isn't meant to be something that you can, have 4 years of experience and get. You're just not going to be, you won't have the expert level knowledge and experience that we as an organization are then willing to put a certification upon you to say, yes, this is someone who is qualified to be an expert, serve as an expert witness on a construction claims dispute.
I sort of view this passing this test and getting this certification as being the PE of claims.
Times 2. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Somebody want to say something? Okay. Well, then the next question is, will you consider a FIDIC certificate as a consultant engineer?
I've worked around the world and I've worked with FIDIC in many, many different countries. I don't believe that certification would actually qualify you as an expert. If you want to submit that to us with an application, we'll go through and do a deep dive.
Yeah, I was going to say, go ahead, and the worst thing that could happen is it can be not accepted, but put in the application and they'll review it and see if it qualifies. Somebody else mentioned there's a benchmarking featured paper done by Paul Giamalvo, and his AACE reviewed that while considering the certification. I'm sorry to the person who wrote this. I formulated it as a question.
I have done that. We've circulated that paper to the cert board when it came out, which was, the first edition came out probably 6 or 7 years ago, second edition. And Paul, who's a gentleman I've worked, known for many years, Paul Giamalvo put the CFCC certification in that top tranche of validity with respect to certifications. And so we're very familiar with that. And although, anyway, in my case, I'm very proud of the fact that Paul.
But you're correct, Jim, in that we've seen not only the original edition of that, but any of the updates that he's issued through time. So we are aware of it and do review it whenever it's updated.
Yes.
But this certification, and I guess we have a second expert level certification. We are very proud of the fact that those certifications are held out on the far edges of the expertise level, and don't we're not looking to move it back to the middle, let's say.
Correct.
We currently don't have any more questions in the queue.
Well, can we advertise for the certification?
Oh, wait a minute, one just popped up.
It's from somebody saying, thank you all. We'll consider to apply for the CFCC in the near future.
Look forward to
Great.
seeing your
Look to see
application.
Your application, yeah.
Yeah, we look forward to that. Yes, Nick, you can use this opportunity as your last pitch to the 13 attendees of
Yes.
why they should take this exam. They've heard your experience and how you got to where you are, but
Yeah, if you would, it's a certification that's well worth having. I think it should fit well in anybody's career path, and it will help you, I think, tremendously. If you've unless you're already an expert and have testified, then it will help you. Well, I think both in your career and also if you intend to move into the area of being an expert, testifying expert, and all 13 of you who are listening to this, I would strongly encourage you. If you don't feel that you're qualified, I would say contact Jim and say, look, Jim, I want to apply, but I'm unsure if I'm qualified. Is that something they can do, Jim? And just say, can you, is this going to, without having to, pay for the exam. Is that something they could do? Is to contact you maybe, or and get a read whether or not they may or may not be qualified if they're borderline qualified. I would certainly recommend everyone that's listening that has an interest in the certification, that if you're not qualified, work towards those qualifications, get the years of experience and the recommendations that you need, and sit for the exam and take the exam, and because I think it's a certification that's well worth obtaining, and certainly encourage you to do so.
I would
And I
add,
think
I would add that there's such a small number of people that have passed the exam that you can't help but elevate yourself into the upper echelon of the claims consulting group.
Yeah, that's a good point, Glenn. And also, when you look at the requirements for the certification on the website, you'll notice that there's also a recertification requirement. Right? So every 3 years you have to either accumulate enough continuing education units to recertify, or you will find yourself in a circumstance of having to resit for the examination to recertify.
Very true. I do have a couple more questions in the queue. The next one is the risk certification now has a professional level certification. Is there any plan to do this for the CFCC level? Do a professional level?
So I'm going to jump in on that one. The professional level certifications that precede the CFCC are, for example, the PSP, the Planning and Scheduling Professional, or in terms of cost, the Certified Estimating Professional or Certified Cost Professional. So those are the forerunners of background professional level certifications that lead up to the CFCC. Jim, I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No, not at all. We, unlike the risk thing, the expert level risk exam, because I was I was the VP of tech at the time that came up. That was meant for only the senior managers anyway, the guys who actually make the decision on the risk. And so the professional level was ratcheted down to the people who are doing the risk management or the risk assessment on a project level, not making decisions, but setting up the risk charts and things like that. And so that's why that was done. There really is no corollary to that in the claims business. So like Charlie said, the PSP, CEP, CCP, those would be the professional level. So we're not going to create another exam, because we already have those three as the stepping stone, getting to it.
You're muted, Val.
I'm muted. I realized that finally. The next questions are, how many people currently hold this certification and how many have applied and received the certification in the last 5 years? Could you provide a general, any general information about their background? So the first part is 73, I believe, currently hold the certification. You can always find that information through our certified directory, and I'm getting ready to post the link here. You do need to put in 2 fields in order for the query to render. Penny, do you have that information for the second part?
Well, if you do the third part, I'm going to go get the information for the second part.
Jim, do you guys want to take that general, if you can remember?
Well, the background tends to be engineers, architects, construction managers who got involved in the claim, and then they meet all the other requirements. So basically speaking, you can read their background from the requirements to apply for the exam. They're all, I don't think I've seen any in all the years I've been involved here that didn't have at least 1 degree, and many have 2. And of course, they have to have at least 1 post-educational certification, professional certification. And I saw one not too long ago that had 5.
Right.
So,
And Jim, we've had folks who have been architects or engineers and also lawyers.
now I've not seen that application, Charlie. So it must have been before I was on the CFCC committee.
Yes.
But a lot of them have been schedulers, because schedulers tend to be, even though Glenn went into scheduling thinking he was going to be planning a job, ended up trying to clean up the mess when it didn't deliver on time. So, a lot of them tend to be schedulers, heavy on the scheduling side, because schedulers tend to get involved in a lot of change orders and claims.
Exactly.
But we've seen, at least, I've been involved now for, I guess 4 years now. I mean, it's kind of, we've seen people who are, almost purely in-house to a general contractor in terms of developing claims that have applied and been accepted. And then we've seen those that are, like myself, expert outside consultants. So it really does run the gamut.
Yeah.
As long as they hit all the criteria, how you get there, there's no prescribed method as long as it's claims focused on the experience.
Yeah, I mean, we've had people who are professional engineers and CPAs.
Yeah.
Who have spent the bulk of their career involved in preparation of claims or defense or analysis of claims.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, Charlie, you mentioned CPA. That's a good thing there, because myself, I'm more schedule oriented, I would say, but I do have the cost side as well. But that's that's a place that we probably see fewer on the cost side, I would say, Jim, at least in the past several, that they're more cost focused than schedule focused. They seem to be very schedule oriented, schedule analysis oriented.
I think one of the reasons why there are so few people that seek the certification, my experience over 50 years is that a lot of the younger folks think, oh man, that claims person, that looks like a lot of fun. And they go through one claim and get beaten up or chewed on or whatever and say, never again.
Well, and
Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's the rigors of that, and then it's the rigors of all the work with the attorneys preparing for what you're going to do.
There's
Right.
that, and a lot of people, it only takes one testimony to convince them this is not for me.
One cross-examination.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the direct examination's a piece of cake. That's all rehearsed.
That's right.
But that cross-examination, that's where you're in the money.
So Penny did give me the answer. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Charlie.
Mm. Go ahead.
Okay. So the question for how many applied and received the CFCC in the last 5 years, the answer to that is 13. That's for who received the certification. To find how many people applied takes a little bit more time. But what I'm going to do is in the chat box, I'm going to give you the link for the annual accreditation reports. For the past years, we still need to get our current year and to 2022 there. But it kind of gives you an idea of like the pass fail rate, and it gives you the number of people who've taken the exam. So that might give you a better idea of how many people sit for the CFCC exam.
If I'm not mistaken, there's a certain number of people that have passed the test that didn't recertify as well. So, you know, that contributes to the low number as well.
And there have been a number of people who have retired.
Because they had to get that 24 years.
Yeah, because it took them so long to get the certification. They immediately retired.
Yeah. Like, I'm done.
No, but it is true. I think it is exciting, and it is definitely challenging to testify and to be an expert. But it is also there's a negative aspect to it. It's extremely difficult. There's a lot of pressure. If you've ever been involved in a trial, very, very long days and long nights in preparation and assisting, and the cross examinations can be very brutal. So that they're pretty difficult. So it's not it's not as all like the Dr. Stone in Officer and Gentleman, who sat there for, I timed it was 7 minutes of his both the direct and cross, 7 minutes. It's not like that. It's not like that at all in a real trial, where you'll sit there for hours under cross, and so it can be pretty challenging, but certainly worthwhile, if you can do it.
Somebody asked, have you noticed a change in applications during and after COVID?
What was the question, Valerie?
Have you noticed a change in the number of applications during and after COVID?
I can't say as how I have, no.
No, I don't think so.
I haven't noticed any change in the applications, but I think I've certainly noticed the way that depositions and testimony is much more well received doing remotely than before. Before, you're an expert, you kind of needed to be there at trial, but now I see a lot of times where you can request, and it's very common, I think, now to testify without being present, or being present only remotely. I've seen that done a lot now, where it wasn't in the past.
I do know that when we were at the Society of Construction Law in North America conference last year, there was a U.S. attorney there that said that they had just recently conducted the first jury trial by remote. So the bench, you have the witnesses, you have the attorneys, the plaintiffs, the defendant, and the jury. And he said it actually went quite well.
Hmm.
You know, it's so it can be done, and that might give a different approach, or at least a different feeling. It's not like you want to reach out and grab them by the throat, right, Nick?
They want to.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, this webinar just took a turn. So we have about 4 minutes left. So if you do have a burning question, get it in the Q&A before we end. We want to be respectful of all of our panelists' time. Speaking of being experts, and we have one who is joining us from Japan. Raise your hand, Nick. So get your questions in, and I just want to remind you that you don't have to wait for next year's webinar. If you have any questions, just and I know that we put it in the chat already, just send us an email at certification@aacei.org, and I know Val probably put it in the chat here in a second. And we'll take those questions and get them to the panelists and get an answer to you. And we just want to encourage you to take all that you've learned here today. Consider taking that step and applying for CFCC certification. And we'll look forward to seeing it hit our desks and help you navigate this new journey for you. And you too maybe one day will be a panelist on a webinar like this. So if there isn't anything else, Charlie, would you like to have any other parting words?
Just thank everyone who joined us to ask questions, and to thank the panelists for their time and in preparing and responding to the questions. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you all. And attendees, thank you so much for spending your time with us. We know that you wouldn't have joined us if you weren't interested in the certification. So we look forward to working with you in the future. Otherwise, have a good evening, and it was nice being with you. Bye.
Bye now.
Bye, everyone.